Hello, everyone. This is Bernard Eshibantin, and this is Offin River Forum, a forum for geopolitical issues around the world, how nations interact with each other, interstate relations, how nations interact or deal with each other in the global arena. These are some of the issues this forum, Offin River Forum, is going to focus on. So welcome to this forum, ladies and gentlemen. So today, the discussions or the conversation will be focused on Russia-Ukraine conflict, the crisis, what is unfolding between Russia and Ukraine as we speak today. But before I start talking briefly about the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, let me try to contextualize what is going on between Russia and Ukraine from the perspective of might makes right. So somewhere in 435 BC, there was this Greek political historian called Thucydides. So Thucydides wrote a book entitled History of the Peloponnesian War. History of the Peloponnesian War. So in the book, Peloponnesian War, Thucydides, the Greek historian, argued, among other things, that in the international or global affairs, when nations dealing with each other all the time, might make right. M-I-G-H-T, might makes right. What does it mean? What it means is countries try to be powerful, get all the bombs, the bigger equipment, military equipment, and stronger, powerful bombs, nuclear weapons. So in the course of dealing with other weaker, relatively weaker nations, it seems like those countries that have bigger weapons, powerful nations, always seems to be right on everything they do or everything they say. So pretty much they get away with so many things. And so that is why nations strive hard to get nuclear weapons and other powerful bombs and airplanes so they can have military support to support their bluff in the international arena. And so when Thucydides argued that might makes right, that is basically what he's saying. And it resonates with all nations, contemporary nations today, because every nation is trying to be stronger than each other. Because the more you get power, the more you can get away with a lot of things on the bargaining table in terms of in the course of international negotiation and agreements. So basically that is what Thucydides was talking about. Might makes right in the international arena, because if you look at it, there's no such thing as world government. And so because we don't have world government, nations, powerful nations, act as if they are the world policemen, because there's no strong or effective law enforcement mechanism in the global arena. So nations that have power, military, economic, money, influence, pretty much call the shot in the international arena. So if you look at countries like Russia, China, United States, France, Germany, that is what it is, because they can get away with everything. Think about it. Let's go down to what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine crisis. See, think about it. Can Ghana or Nigeria invade its neighbor country and use a pretext or excuse that it is going there to get rid of, say, Boko Haram or some element of Al-Qaeda or whatever in other countries? No, it's not. It's not possible. Or even if it's possible, there's no way the bigger, powerful nations will allow that to happen. But when it comes to the other side of the shoe, say United States, China, or Russia, pretty much they can do whatever they want to do and get away with it, because they have nuclear weapons. And when you have nuclear weapons, we say it seems like you have what? You have life insurance policy. You are somehow secured. Nobody can attack you. And so when nations struggle, clamor to have nuclear weapons, this is one of the reasons, or this is the major reason, because when you have it, it seems like nobody can attack you. And Mr. Putin knows he sits on about 6,500 nuclear warheads, nuclear weapons. The closest, or the country that has a little bit higher more than Russia is United States. And so Putin, President Putin of Russia, knows he can do a lot of things. United States will not or cannot attack Russia, because in a nuclear war or nuclear warfare, experts said 1 + 1 = 0. In a nuclear war, 1 + 1 = 0. What does it mean? It means that if two powerful nuclear nations crashes or fight in a nuclear war, there will be no winner. The answer is 0. Everybody loses. So that is why experts in a nuclear war or about nuclear dynamics says 1 + 1 in a nuclear war = 0. Nobody will be a winner. Everybody died in this war. So that is basically, and Mr. Putin knows that. He is sitting on about 6,500 nuclear or 6,500 nuclear weapons. And pretty much United States will not go to Ukraine and join with Ukraine and fight Russia. It will be a third world war, and the whole world will be destroyed over and over again. So that is why Thucydides, the Greek political historian, argues, among other things, that in the global affairs, one might makes right. So basically, that is what he was talking. So let's talk briefly about Mr. Putin's reasons of going to Ukraine. It doesn't even make sense. One, his argument is there is so many elements of fascist or Nazis in Ukraine. So he going there to rid the country of Nazis or fascists, neo-Nazis fashion in Ukraine. But if you look at it, it's not true, because Zelensky, the current president of Ukraine, is a Jew. And we know that Jews and Nazis are antithetical to each other. In other words, they are mutually exclusive. They cannot coexist. And so that question doesn't hold much water. It doesn't hold water. So there's so many holes in that argument that it doesn't make no sense. That is not true. Okay, and then he gave another reason. Another reason is Ukraine and Russia are two people. They share the same heritage, the same culture, the same everything. But that is also not true. That he thinks Ukraine and Russia cultures and historical culture and everything reflect each other, and therefore they should all become one. Because Mr. Putin looked at it and realized that Ukraine for the longest is trying to join the NATO or European nation. And Mr. Putin, as a former KGB, has never forgotten or has never forgiven the Western nations led by the United States for causing, according to his thinking, Mr. Putin thinking, for causing the breakup or the breakdown or the disintegration of Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, in the late 80s and early 90s. So Mr. Putin harbored a feeling of sentiment, nationalistic sentiment, that it was because of NATO countries led by the United States that Soviet Union broke up. And so Mr. Putin has never forgiven the West. So for Ukraine to try to be part of NATO today is a big blow and poses existential threat, not only to the regime, Putin regime, but to the entire survival of Russian nation, according to Mr. Putin thinking. So everything he can do to make sure that it doesn't happen, he will do it. And again, remember, might make right, because Mr. Putin has that might. Stronger, powerful, military powerful, more powerful than Ukraine. It seems like he can come up with any excuse and feel like everything he's saying is the right thing. And so that is what it is, because nobody can attack a nuclear nation like Russia. But guess what? One thing, the main reason Mr. Putin went to Ukraine and is causing these barbaric killings and everything in Ukraine, it's not about neo-Nazis in Ukraine or the fact that Ukraine and Russia are the same people. That is not the reason. The main reason is economic. It's oil. Russia is a petrol state. It's a petrol nation. Gasoline, energy. nation. In other words, it depends heavily on energy for its GDP. Let's break this down. About 60% of Russia's export revenue, about 60% of Russia export revenue comes from oil. About 60%. Pretty chunk of money. And then 40% of Russia's total budget, 40% of Russia's total budget, annual budget, also is derived from oil, energy. Think about it. And then, this is what Mr. Putin doesn't want the world to know. And then, about 40% of all the energy oil needs of the European nations come from Russia. About 40% of all the energy, petrol, natural gas, all those heating needs come from Russia, 40%. And for this oil to get to European markets, for Russia to access those European markets, he has to transport the oil to Europe. And that oil comes from Russia to Europe, goes through two main pipelines that was built somewhere in the 60s or early 70s. One of them goes through Belarus and one of them goes through Ukraine. The oil that goes from Russia to Europe, it goes through two major pipelines, old pipeline. One goes through Ukraine, one goes through Belarus. The one that goes through Belarus is not a big deal. It's not a problem. Why? Because Belarus, more or less, is a puppet. It's a satellite state. It's an ally, strong ally of Mr. Putin or Russia. And so Mr. Putin doesn't have an issue with the pipeline, the gas pipeline or the oil pipeline that goes through Belarus. The problem Mr. Putin has is the one that goes through Ukraine. Because Ukraine is trying hard to be part of the Western nations. And think about it, Mr. Putin, as a former KGB star, has never forgiven the Western nation for what he thinks they did to the breakup, leading to the breakup of Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. And so Mr. Putin wants control over that oil pipeline, that gas pipeline that goes through Belarus. For that oil pipeline that goes through, Ukraine, Mr. Putin pays $2 billion a year. Or Russia pays $2 billion a year. The oil pipeline that goes through Ukraine, Mr. Putin pays $2 billion as a transit fee for that oil that comes from Russia all the way to European market. Mr. Putin pays, or Russia pays $2 billion. Think about it. It's a pretty large sum of money. And so Mr. Putin's fears are that Ukraine fighting hard to be part of the European Union and at the same time NATO will just create a economic havoc for Russia. And so that is what is killing Mr. Putin, because Russia depends heavily on oil for everything, almost everything. And so that is basically what it is. And Mr. Putin doesn't want anybody to know that the fight he's fighting in Ukraine today is not about Russia identity in terms of the fact that Ukraine and Russia share the same cultural identity or heritage, or the fact that there's so many elements of neo-Nazis and fascist element in Ukraine. That is not true. The main reason Mr. Putin is in Ukraine and killing people innocently, children, old and young, is because of economic. Mr. Putin needs that money to support himself and his oligarchs, his supporters, his cronies. And so that is what is, again, to re-emphasize what I've just said. The main reason the major reason Mr. Putin is invading Ukraine is nothing but oil. Because Russia is a petrol nation. It depends heavily on oil for everything. 60% of its export revenues come from oil, and 40% of its total budget expenses also come from oil. And so that is what, and they supply about 40% of all the European oil needs. And so that is what Mr. Putin wants control over the pipeline, the gas pipeline or the oil pipeline that goes through Ukraine. And so That is what is happening today. And so don't be fooled by anything you hear from Putin or the disinformation and the propaganda that is going on around this and that. The main reason Mr. Putin is in Ukraine is because of oil. So that is what it is. Thank you for watching. And this is Offin River Forum. And I'm Bernard Ishbontin in Atlanta, Georgia. Keep watching this channel or this forum and subscribe, like, share with your friends and relatives and everybody. And it's going to be fun. It's very informative, fun, entertaining, and everything. And I'll see you another time. Have a good day.